You know, some ideas, once they get into your head, they just never seem to leave. And one of the biggest, most persistent ones out there is the idea that the moon landing was faked. So in this explainer, we're going to go right back to the source. We're talking about the 1976 book that really gave this whole idea its voice and asked a pretty world-shattering question. What if it was all a lie?
So, here it is, the book itself. We Never Went to the Moon by Bill Kaysing. Now, let's be super clear about something right up front. Our goal here isn't to get into a big debate about whether we went to the moon or not. Nope. What we're doing is unpacking the specific arguments and the worldview that are laid out right here, inside the pages of the book that really kicked this whole thing off. This is the foundational text, the one that basically armed a whole generation of skeptics.
And wow, the author does not pull any punches. I mean, just look at that subtitle. You can tell right away this isn't some gentle suggestion of doubt. Oh no, it is a straight-up accusation of a massive, government-run fraud. That one phrase right there, it sets a super confrontational tone for the entire book.
So you have to wonder, who's the guy bold enough to make such an incredible claim? Well, to really get the power of this book, you first have to understand the story it tells about its author, Bill Kaysing. Because, you see, the entire argument is built on his credibility as an insider.
Okay, so the book presents Bill Kaysing as someone who was on the inside. He actually worked at a company called Rocketdyne for 7 years as a technical writer. And this isn't just any company, okay? This is the company that built the F-1 engines for the Saturn V rocket, the very engines that were supposed to get us to the moon. So the crucial point the book makes is that this connection positions him not as some random outsider, but as someone who had a front-row seat to the whole program.
In the book, Kaysing talks about the exact moment that his doubt really took hold. So, picture this. It's the summer of 1969. The whole world is glued to their TVs, just watching in awe. And he felt, well, nothing. He describes this complete lack of enthusiasm and instead, this powerful, totally unshakable feeling of disbelief. And this is where the book's argument takes a really fascinating turn. See, Kaysing is upfront about the fact that his initial conviction wasn't based on, some pile of data or a smoking gun. He actually describes it as something way more instinctual. He calls it a hunch, an intuition, even a metaphysical message. So his whole journey into this didn't start with evidence. It started with a feeling.
Okay, but if it was a hoax, the biggest question is why? Why would they do it? And the book spends a lot of time trying to establish a really powerful motive.
According to the book, there are basically three main reasons. First up, geopolitical prestige. To once and for all win the space race against the Soviets and the Chinese. Second, money. They needed to justify the billions and billions of dollars spent on the space program. And third, it was a distraction, a huge spectacle to keep the American public's mind off of other, more pressing issues. And to back this up, the book pulls out quotes like this one from Congressman James Fulton. It really paints a picture of the political pressure cooker they were in back then, right? This win-at-all-costs mentality where, as the book argues, the goal of beating the Soviets could justify pretty much anything.
I love this metaphor from the book. It really drives the point home. It compares the U.S. effort to a frantic gambler making one last massive bet. And the stakes? He must win, or it's all gone. So in this version of the story, faking it wasn't just some crazy option. It was actually a necessary failsafe. So once the book has laid out the why, it switches gears to its main strategy. And it's a clever one. Instead of trying to present some kind of definitive proof of a hoax, it does something else entirely. It just unleashes this relentless flood of questions, and every single one is designed to chip away at the official story and plant a tiny seed of doubt in your mind.
The first thing it goes after is the quality of the evidence we all saw. The book asks a pretty simple question, right? For what was supposed to be the most watched event in human history, why was the visual proof so limited and, as the book puts it, so easily simulated?
Then the book casts doubt on the very start of the mission. It shows you images of that epic launch and then asks this really chilling question directly to you, the reader. It forces you to actually confront the idea that maybe, just maybe, the astronauts weren't even on board.
Okay, next up, the questions turn to the only physical evidence that was supposedly brought back, the moon rocks. The book really zeroes in on how these rocks were handled, calling it deeply suspicious and asking why on earth they were supposedly rushed off to Switzerland.
And of course, the book has an answer to its own question. It claims that faking the rocks was actually the easiest part of the whole hoax.
It flat out asserts that the rocks didn't show any truly unique lunar properties, and that they only contained minerals that are already common right here on Earth.
From there, the book takes aim at the astronauts' return, specifically that long quarantine period. It questions why that was even necessary, arguing that since scientists pretty much agreed the moon was sterile, there was no real scientific reason to lock them up for so long.
So if it wasn't for science, what was it for? Well, according to the book, the quarantine served a very different purpose. It proposes that it was actually a period of psychological reconditioning, a debriefing to make absolutely sure the astronauts had their stories straight after playing their parts in the spurious trip.
And the book's final line of questioning really hits on the idea of transparency, or the lack of it. Kaysing actually includes a letter he says he got from his old employer, Rocketdyne, which states that Apollo material is unavailable to the public. Now to him, that's not just red tape or bureaucracy. That's proof that crucial data is being deliberately hidden from everyone.
So, after laying out all the motives and firing off all those questions, the book doesn't just end. Nope, it throws down a gauntlet. The whole thing wraps up with a direct, public challenge aimed right at NASA.
And this is basically the book's closing argument. Kaysing frames his entire work like an open letter, not just to NASA but to the entire scientific community. He's essentially daring them to come forward with some kind of indisputable evidence to prove him wrong.
And get this, he basically dismisses all the existing evidence before they can even present it. The book argues that everything the public has already seen, the photos, the ticker tape parades, even the bag of rocks, is all just superficial and totally inadequate. So in effect, the book sets this incredibly high standard of proof that, in its own opinion, has never been met.
And really, that's the ultimate power of a book like this. I mean, regardless of the actual facts of the moon landing, its true legacy is in the questions it leaves you with. By framing doubt not as an answer, but as an ongoing investigation, it created a kind of blueprint for questioning official stories that's still incredibly powerful today. And it really forces us all to ask ourselves a tough question. When you're faced with a story that just feels too big, too good to be true, what level of proof is ever really enough?